Hello everyone, it's History Behind the Warrior, and as always, welcome back to yet another Mortal Kombat video. Now today, coming off last week's episode, where we touched on some of the discarded and some of the lost characters in very early development. In today's video, we're going to continue that trend, and actually touch on the cancelled Mortal Kombat DLC characters throughout Mortal Kombat's history. Individuals that were intended to be released post-game, but for one reason or another, didn't quite make the cut. Now with that said, I do want to say a note that I'll only be mentioning and featuring characters that are open to that of public knowledge, or individuals that have been found and data mined in the game, as there is in fact a bunch of different characters hidden beneath the game's surface. So, with that said, just before we do kick things off here, quick reminder that if you like what we do here and wish to see more, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does go a long way in supporting the channel. And hey, if you want to stick around to see more, please don't forget to subscribe. Anywho, let's dive right into things. Now to kick things off, we must actually go to the very first Mortal Kombat game that did in fact have DLC. The very controversial Mortal Kombat 8, Mortal Kombat vs DC Universe. That's a pretty rough start as the studio goes for making DLC. Now, say what you will about the quality of this game, but the 8th installment in the franchise came at a very tumultuous time for the studio, where Midway was on the brink of bankruptcy. Due to this uncertain time for the studio, production on these characters would be halted and later cancelled, as Midway did slowly start to dissolve. So upon the liquidation, Mortal Kombat as well as the Midway team would be picked up and acquired by Warner Brothers. So this isn't really anything new, it's a tale as old as time at this point. But what was actually planned in the post-release of Mortal Kombat vs DC? Well, there was in fact 4 DLC characters on the cutting room floor. The first would be Quan Chi, who does actually feature in the game's story, and Liu Kang's Shaolin brethren, Kung Lao. These two were planned to release alongside Harley Quinn and Doomsday, but of course, for very obvious reasons, would not quite see fruition. However, the legacy of Mortal Kombat vs DC does live on for these characters in some way, shape and form, as it is worth noting that in particular, Quan Chi's MK vs DC model would actually be utilized for Mortal Kombat 9, so the assets would be reused here. So Mortal Kombat's first attempt at DLC did come at a really bad time for the series, but the legacy of that game would continue to live on in its sequel, Mortal Kombat 9, which is in fact our next game we're talking about here. Now this is a particularly hard grey area in terms of cancelled DLC, because whilst no official news was declared of him in the post-release of the game, when we dig into the files of the game and begin to unravel its data mined content, there is one character and voice line that is infamously hidden in it: Fujin. Now, the reason why I say this is quite a sketchy character to touch on is largely due to the fact that beyond this voice line, there are no actual assets of him in game. There's no character models, there's no intros or outros, and there isn't even an arcade ladder ending for him. And the reason why I say this is particularly strange is due to the fact that even the boss characters of the game who aren't playable, Goro, Kintaro and Shao Kahn, do in fact have their own arcade ladder endings. Whilst they themselves aren't fully voiced, it can be believed that at some point in time, Fujin absolutely must have been on the cutting room floor. And it's even possible to believe that his very brief appearance in the first chapter of MKX may have actually been his intended model design for Mortal Kombat 9. Now, if I am to put my tinfoil hat theory cap on, I'm of the belief that Fujin was more than likely considered to be DLC in the post-game, but probably got sidelined for MK9's guest character, Freddy Krueger, which really would explain why that voice line ultimately led to nothing. Again, tinfoil hat theory, but it does make sense. Now this is very loosely off topic, but there was also some talk and word about an Xbox exclusive 360 character, but it does sound like those plans very quickly fell apart in early development. I won't go too in depth here about it, as I feel like that really does warrant its own video, but the names tossed around for it would be General Ram, Marcus Phoenix, as well as the Master Chief. So, with Mortal Kombat 9 out the way, this now brings us onto Mortal Kombat X. And this is a particularly tricky one, because Mortal Kombat X and 11 for that matter actually go hand in hand with what I would say are fairly complete packages. I mean, minus the whole Ash Williams issue. But all in all, Mortal Kombat X and 11 have very little room for expansion, because when we pull up the data mine files and assets of the game, and we really dig deep, there's only 5 characters across 2 games that could have been utilized as DLC. And that is Rain, Sindel, and Baraka from MKX, as well as Cyrax and Sector from Mortal Kombat 11. Now these are very niche and strange issues, because all 5 of these characters are NPCs, and are completely not intended to be played by the player, hence why the only way of them being utilized is through mods. So naturally, it did raise the question of, were these characters intended to be part of some kind of extra combat pack? That's hard to say, because whilst they do have their own movesets, these aren't originally designed from this game, as the movesets of Rain, Sindel, and Baraka are all lifted from Mortal Kombat 9, just repurposed for this game, and Cyrax and Sector are complete reskins of Triborg from MKX. And to somewhat emphasize their unpolished nature, despite their new and fresh facelifts, when a fatal blow is performed on them, it doesn't cut away to their skeleton at all, but instead it utilizes their existing assets. And I know some might say it's to reinforce their cyberization, but hey, if you can do it to Frost, you should be able to do it to them. As for why, that's currently unknown, but it is of course to serve a narrative purpose. With that in mind, were these 5 ever intended to be part of some kind of combat pack? Possibly. There's nothing indicating that there was going to be another combat pack, but it's also kind of impossible to ignore what is already here, especially with those refurbished Sector and Cyrax designs. If again, I was to make some own assumptions of my own, I think that these characters could have very well been victims of NetherRealm's 2-year developmental cycle, as it would have made a lot of sense why not much came from their assets. Alas, this is all an assumption and a mystery, but one that I definitely do think holds some weight. So this now takes us onto Mortal Kombat 1, with the somewhat forbidden Kombat Pack 3. Now, I'm not gonna touch too much on this, as this is stuff that's yet to be confirmed, but currently during the process of making this video, there was news from a trusted insider that currently due to some financial strife from Warner Brothers, development on Mortal Kombat 1 may have been cut a tad bit short, with supposedly the next story expansion as well as the next combat pack being scrapped, and the DLC itself would consist of Sonya, Kano, Cassie Cage, Jade, and Kung Jin, all assets that we do know currently exist in-game, minus Jade. Again, this isn't entirely solid in stone, so I wouldn't take it as much more than a rumor right now, but it's still absolutely something worth mentioning here. Only time will tell, and like that, this has covered every single lost DLC character throughout Mortal Kombat's history. And I found this project particularly interesting for a number of different reasons. Not just so much to see who was reintegrated later down the line, but more so the characters themselves that have graced the cutting room floor. It's particularly intriguing to see why they're there, but always does bring up the question as to why. Whether it's budget constraints, licensing issues, or even time constraints, we'll never truly know. But I do hope this video has given you some better insight about these characters, and the reasons as to why they may not have made it in. So with that said and everything I mentioned here, which of these cancelled DLC characters would you have actually liked to have seen been in game? Who do you believe was a missed opportunity on that cutting room floor? Please do comment down below, as I'd love to hear what you have to say, because I myself would have most certainly loved to have seen Fujin in MK9. But for now everyone, that has been it for me. So as always, stay strong, stay well, and I'll catch you in the next one.